The champagne glass shattered against the kitchen floor 2 seconds before my sister-in-law looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer welcome at my brother's wedding rehearsal dinner. That was a Thursday evening in April. By the following Monday morning, I had wired $4.3 million in cash to close on a property the size of her entire neighborhood. I did not cry. I did not argue. I picked up my purse, said nothing, and walked out the front door of the restaurant while 47 members of my family watched in complete silence. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is not important. What is important is that I grew up the middle child in a family where middle meant invisible. My older brother, Daniel, was the firstborn son, the golden one, the one my father coached through Little League even when it rained, the one my mother ironed dress shirts for on Sunday mornings, the one whose college tuition was paid without a single conversation about cost. My younger sister, Becca, was the baby, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose broken curfews became funny stories at dinner, the one who borrowed money and never paid it back and was never once asked to. And then there was me. I was the one who made her own lunch every morning from age 9. I was the one who figured out the bus schedule when nobody offered to drive me to school. I was the one who applied for college financial aid alone, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of tax documents I had sorted myself, while my mother watched television in the next room and my father said, without looking up from his newspaper, "You'll figure it out. You always do." I did figure it out. I always did. And for most of my 20s, I told myself that was enough. I told myself that being capable and self-sufficient was something to be proud of, not something to grieve. I graduated from Vanderbilt with a degree in computer science. I got a job at a mid-sized software firm in Nashville before my diploma was even printed. I was promoted twice in 3 years. I started taking on freelance contracts on evenings and weekends, building internal tools for small businesses, automating workflows for startups, consulting for companies that needed someone who could translate complicated technical problems into solutions that actually worked. I was good at it. I was very good at it. And because I lived simply a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city, no car payment, no expensive habits, I saved almost everything I made. My family knew I worked in tech. They did not ask questions about it. My mother occasionally told people at church that her daughter does something with computers, the way someone might describe a child who repairs appliances. My father asked once, at Thanksgiving, whether I had benefits and a 401k. When I said yes, he nodded and returned to his turkey. That was the full extent of their interest in my career for approximately 6 years. Daniel knew slightly more, but not because he asked. He knew because I had helped him once 3 years earlier, when he was trying to launch a small e-commerce side business and needed a website and an inventory system. I built it for him over 1 weekend. I did not charge him. He thanked me, launched the business, and within 8 months had sold it to a competitor for enough money to put a down payment on a house in Brentwood. He never mentioned my contribution. Not once, not to me, and not to anyone else. I did not say anything about it. I told myself it did not matter. Then he met Courtney. Courtney was 29, originally from Connecticut, and had the particular talent of making every room she entered feel slightly smaller. She was not unkind in the obvious way. She never raised her voice, never said anything overtly cruel. She worked in a subtler register. She had a way of looking at you while you were speaking that suggested she was waiting for you to finish so she could return to a more interesting conversation. She had a way of laughing at things that was just slightly delayed, as though she was deciding whether something deserved her amusement before committing to it. She had a way of referring to Daniel's family to my family as you all, in a tone that placed her reliably outside of it. From the moment Daniel introduced her at Christmas 2 years ago, I understood that Courtney had assessed me and placed me in a category. I was not sure exactly what the category was, but I knew it was not a flattering one. She asked what I did, and when I told her software development, consulting, she smiled pleasantly and asked if I worked for a company or just freelance. She emphasized the word just in a way that was small enough to deny but large enough to land. Mostly independent now, I said. Oh, that's fun, she said, and turned back to Daniel. I told myself it did not matter. Over the next 2 years, Courtney became the organizing principle of our family's social calendar. Sunday dinners moved to restaurants she preferred. Holiday gatherings shifted in format based on her input. My mother, who had never particularly invested in making me feel central to anything, discovered in Courtney a daughter-in-law worth impressing. She took her shopping. She called her in the evenings. She asked her opinion on furniture. I watched this from a careful distance and reminded myself, as I had been reminding myself for 3 decades, that I was fine, that I did not need to be chosen, that I had built a life that didn't depend on any of them. What I had built, by that point, was more than any of them knew. The freelance work had grown steadily and then dramatically. A referral from a satisfied client had led to a 6-month contract with a logistics company in Atlanta. That contract led to 2 more. I had incorporated as an LLC, hired 2 contractors to work under me, and for the past 18 months had been pulling in more in a single quarter than my father had earned in any full year of his career. I had invested methodically index funds, a small rental property in East Nashville that I managed myself, and 2 years ago, a significant position in a private equity deal that a client had offered me access to as partial payment for a project. That position had returned nearly 4 times the initial investment when the company was acquired. I did not talk about any of this, not because I was hiding it, exactly, but because no one had asked, and because I had learned, a long time ago, that the people in my life were not particularly interested in what I was building. They were interested in what they could see. And what they could see was a woman in her early 30s who lived in a modest apartment and showed up to family dinners alone and did something with computers. The engagement announcement came in January. Daniel called me. He actually called me, which was unusual enough that I answered on the first ring to say that he had proposed to Courtney on New Year's Eve and she had said yes. I told him I was happy for him. I was. In the genuine but measured way you are happy for someone you love but are not particularly close to anymore. She wants a big wedding, he said. June. In Nashville. That sounds nice. We want you to be there, obviously. A brief pause. Courtney's going to have her 2 sisters as bridesmaids. Becca too. We're keeping the wedding party pretty tight. I understood what he was not saying. I was not being asked to be a bridesmaid. Of course, I said. I'll be there. I hung up and sat with it for a while. It was not a surprise. It stung anyway. The months leading up to the wedding were a study in small exclusions that I noted and filed away without reacting to. The engagement party in February, I was invited but not consulted on any part of it, and I arrived to find that Courtney's friends had been given specific roles while I was handed a glass of wine and pointed toward the appetizer table. The dress shopping in March. Becca mentioned it after the fact, the way you mentioned something you assumed was not relevant. The bridal shower in April, I was on the invitation list this time, at least. I sat at the end of a long table and answered questions about myself from Courtney's Connecticut friends with the patience of someone who has been doing this her entire life. Through all of it, I said nothing. I smiled. I brought appropriate gifts. I helped where I was asked and stayed out of the way where I was not. And then came the rehearsal dinner. It was the Thursday before the Saturday wedding. The venue was a private room at a restaurant in the Gulch, the kind of place with leather banquettes and a prix-fixe menu and lighting, designed to make everyone look slightly more successful than they are. I arrived on time, wearing a dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, and found that the seating arrangement placed me at the far end of the table with Daniel's college roommates and an aunt I had not spoken to in 7 years. I sat down. I ordered a glass of water. I listened to toasts and laughed at appropriate moments and was, by any observable measure, a perfectly pleasant and undemanding guest. The problem began about an hour in, when Courtney's mother made a comment loud enough for the table to hear, quiet enough to be deniable about how remarkable it was that Daniel had built such a successful life. She meant financially. She meant the Brentwood house and the leased BMW and the LinkedIn profile that listed him as a serial entrepreneur. She had clearly been briefed on Daniel's achievements extensively and wanted the room to understand that her daughter had done well. Daniel smiled. My mother beamed. My father nodded with the satisfaction of a man being publicly validated. I said nothing. Then Courtney leaned forward slightly, looking past 3 people to find my eyes. It's funny, she said, in that pleasant, measured tone she used when she was sharpening something into a point. Daniel told me you actually helped him build that first business, the website, or whatever. The table got slightly quieter. I helped with the technical side, I said. Right, she smiled. It's sweet that you had that skill set at the time. I know Daniel's really grown past that now he has a whole team for that kind of thing. She paused. You're still doing freelance work? The way she said still. The way she said freelance work. I'm doing well, I said. Of course you are. She reached for her champagne glass. It's just, and I mean this kindly, I do worry sometimes that you've maybe played it a little small, you know? Like, you clearly have talent. It would be nice to see you really go for something. The table was quiet now in the particular way a room gets quiet when someone has said something that cannot be unsaid. I looked at her. Then I looked at Daniel, who was looking at his plate. Then I looked at my mother, who was looking at her water glass. Then I looked at my father, who met my eyes for exactly 1 second before looking away. Nobody said anything. I felt, in that moment, 32 years of understanding arrive at the same conclusion simultaneously. The lunches I had made myself, the financial aid forms I had filled out alone, the website I had built for free that became the foundation of a business I was never credited for. Every dinner where the conversation moved around me, every Christmas where my gifts were the last to be opened and the first to be forgotten. Every version of the same lesson. You are here on tolerance, not invitation. You are useful when you are needed and invisible when you are not. You do not belong at the center of this. I set my napkin on the table. I picked up my purse. I stood up. I hope Saturday is everything you've planned for, I said. I meant it sincerely, and I think that sincerity was what unsettled people more than anything else. I was not angry. I was not trembling. I was simply done. I walked out. I did not go to the wedding. I sent a card, a real one, handwritten and a gift from Daniel and Courtney's registry, the expensive one they had listed almost as a joke, the one nobody was expected to actually purchase. I had it wrapped and delivered to their house on Saturday morning. What I did instead of attending the wedding was drive out to Leipers Fork, about 40 minutes southwest of Nashville, to walk the property I had been in negotiations to purchase for the past 6 weeks. It was 11 acres on a ridge above the Duck River. There was an existing house on it, a 5-bedroom cedar-and-stone structure built in 2019, with a wraparound porch, exposed beams in the main living area, a kitchen that had been designed by someone who actually cooked, and windows, on the western side, that framed a view of the valley that changed character completely, depending on the time of day and the season. There was a detached studio building with fiber internet already installed. There was a barn that had been converted into a workshop. There were mature oak trees along the fence line that had been there for longer than anyone currently living had been alive. The listing price had been $4.7 million. I had negotiated it to $4.3 million. I was paying cash. I stood on the porch on that Saturday afternoon while my brother got married 40 minutes away, and I looked at the valley below me, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not triumph, exactly. Not vindication. Something quieter and more durable than either of those things. Something that felt like arriving somewhere you had been traveling toward for a very long time without knowing that was where you were going. I closed on the property the following Monday. I did not tell my family. I did not tell anyone, actually, for almost 3 months. I moved out of my East Nashville apartment on a Saturday in early July, loaded my things into a rented cargo van, and drove southwest on I-40 with a cup of coffee and my 2 cats in a carrier on the passenger seat. I had already had the studio building wired with a dedicated workstation. I had already had the guest rooms furnished. I had already sat on that porch at dawn 4 separate times during the due diligence period and confirmed, each time, that it was the kind of place that made you feel like you were finally living at the right scale. The work continued. It did not slow down because I had moved. If anything, it expanded the first month in the new house. I signed a contract with a healthcare technology company in Chicago that was the largest single engagement of my consulting career. I worked long mornings and took long afternoons. I walked the fence line in the evenings. I learned the names of the neighboring families. I planted a kitchen garden along the south-facing wall of the house that did better than I had any right to expect for a first attempt. I was happy. Genuinely, quietly, structurally happy, in a way I realized I had been working toward for a very long time. My mother called in August. She called every few weeks, Brief calls about nothing in particular, and mentioned that Daniel and Courtney were back from their honeymoon in Portugal and had hosted a family dinner the previous Sunday. "We missed you," she said. She did not sound entirely certain this was true. "I've been busy," I said. "New project. Your father asked about you?" "Tell him I said hello." There was a pause. "Are you still in the apartment on Shelby?" she asked. "I moved," I said. "Oh." Another pause. "Where to?" "Out of the city a bit. I found a place I really love." She did not ask more questions. She did not press for an address. She told me about Becca's new job and about a neighbor's health situation, and we hung up after 7 minutes the way we always did, having exchanged information without having actually spoken about anything. I did not volunteer details. I did not hide them either. I simply answered what was asked and asked nothing in return, the same way I had learned to operate in this family at age 9. The situation resolved itself in October, at my parents' anniversary party. My aunt, my father's sister, who lived in Franklin and had known me since birth and had always been warmer to me than most of the family, had found my new address somehow. A mutual friend in the area, I think. She had driven past the property once out of curiosity and had apparently mentioned it, with some enthusiasm, at a family gathering I had not attended. So by the time I walked into my parents' house for the 40th anniversary party that October Saturday evening, something had shifted in the room's atmosphere that I could feel before I could identify. There was a particular quality to the way conversations paused when I entered. A particular quality to the way my mother looked at me, not with her usual pleasant detachment, but with something more alert in her eyes. Daniel found me near the kitchen within the first 10 minutes. "Aunt Patricia says you bought a house in Leipers Fork," he said. He was trying to make it sound casual. "I did," I said. "She says it's..." He searched for the word. "Substantial. I like it a lot." He looked at me the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they suddenly realize they misidentified. "She said it's on 11 acres. "Yes." A pause. "How did you..." He stopped. Tried again. "I mean, freelancing must be going." "I've done well," I said. "I've been doing well for a while." Courtney appeared at his shoulder. She had a glass of white wine and an expression that was working hard to remain pleasant. "We were just hearing about your new place," she said. "It's beautiful," I said. "You should see it in the fall. The ridge gets the color really well." She searched my face for something for bitterness, maybe, or for the satisfaction of someone who is performing a reversal. I do not think she found either. I was not performing anything. I was just standing in my parents' kitchen at a party, telling the truth. "How long have you been..." she started, and then reorganized the sentence. "How long have you been at this level with the work?" "A few years. Seriously," I said. "The last 2 have been the strongest." My mother was nearby now, close enough to hear. She was looking at me with an expression I had not seen from her before, a kind of recalculation happening in real time, visible on her face the way recalculations usually are not. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. Her voice was quieter than usual. I looked at her for a moment. I thought about how to answer that honestly without being cruel. "You never asked," I said. It was not an accusation. It was simply true. And the truth of it landed in the room in a way that no accusation could have, clean and without exit. My father came to find us a few minutes later, having clearly been briefed by someone. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed and looked at me the way he had always looked at me, appraisingly, at a slight remove, and then something in his face shifted into something I recognized, even though I had rarely seen it directed at me. Pride, I think, or the beginning of it. "Patricia says the view is something else," he said. "Come see it sometime," I said. "I mean that. I have 5 guest rooms." He nodded slowly. "Maybe we will." I moved through the rest of the party the same way I always had, unhurried, self-contained, pleasant. I talked to my aunt and thanked her, privately, for nothing in particular. I talked to Becca, who grabbed my arm near the end of the evening and said, with genuine feeling, "I can't believe you've been sitting on all this. I want to see everything. Can I come out next weekend?" And I said yes. Daniel found me near the door as I was leaving. Courtney was across the room talking to someone. He looked older than he had in the spring, though it had only been 6 months. He looked like someone who had been rearranging his understanding of something and was not entirely finished. I want to say something, he said. You don't have to, I said. The business, he said. The first one. I never properly. Daniel. I said his name gently. The way you say someone's name when you want them to stop. I don't need you to go back and fix the accounting on everything. I really don't. I'm good. He looked at me. You really are, aren't you? I really am. He hugged me, which he had not done in years. I let him. It was genuine, and I accepted it as such, without the complex arithmetic of resentment or forgiveness that I might have applied to it 6 months earlier. I drove home on the back roads, the ones that wind south through Williamson County past horse farms and church marquees and fields that go dark at the edge of the headlights. The night was cool and clear. When I turned up the gravel drive to my property and the porch light came on automatically, I sat in the car for a moment before going inside. I thought about the girl who had made her own lunch every morning. I thought about the financial aid forms. I thought about the website I had built in a weekend for a brother who had never once credited me for it. I thought about a Thursday evening in April when a woman in a leather banquette had looked past 3 people to find my eyes and tell me, in her careful, pleasant way, that I had played it small. I did not feel angry. I was past anger. Anger requires believing that something is wrong that could have been different. I did not believe that anymore. What had happened, and what I had built had been built, and none of the former had prevented the latter. If anything, and I had turned this over enough times to be honest with myself about it, if anything, being left alone had been the making of me. Nobody's expectations to perform against, nobody's framework to fit into. Just the long, private discipline of figuring it out, the same way I always had, since I was 9 years old. The cats met me at the door. The kitchen smelled like the rosemary I had planted that spring. Through the western windows, the valley below was dark and very still. I made tea. I sat on the porch in a wool blanket. I watched the sky. There were no grand revelations, no final accounting. Nobody had apologized the way they probably should have, and nobody had been particularly punished. That is not how life actually works. And the sooner you make peace with that, the lighter everything becomes. What there was instead was this: a Tuesday morning coming, with good work to do, and a view that earned its keep, and a family that was finally, slowly, beginning to see me. Not because I had proved anything. Not because I had demanded recognition, or staged a confrontation, or waited for the moment when the truth would land like a verdict, but because I had simply built something real, quietly and without permission, in the space that had been left empty when nobody thought to fill it. And real things, eventually, get seen. I finished my tea. I went inside. I slept better than I had in years.